Welcome back to Newsmaker Live. Thank you very much for staying tuned. We're talking technology. In particular, we're discussing cybersecurity. And this is a topic that applies to everyone because most of you, if not all of you, carry mobile phones. Most, if not all of you, have credit cards or debit cards, bank cards that you use. And there are always issues. Most of you go online. You know, you surf the net, there are certain places that you visit, there's certain information that you input, your name, your date of birth, your address, sometimes even your social security number, our NIS numbers here, which, I mean, don't carry much weight, but in the US, you know, they don't know you by your name, they know you by your SSN. So, I mean, these are pieces of information that are very important and can affect your life for good or for bad. We're taking your calls because we're speaking here with Javed Samuel. He's an expert in cyber security, a St. Lucian who is based in California, Silicon Valley, and he's working, consulting, and teaching people how to secure their systems. Now, before our calls come in, and we're inviting you to call, you know, from right now, the number will be put on your screen shortly if it's not there already. So you could ask of him anything that you want as far as technology and security. Let's talk before we even talk about BB versus Android. We have a call. Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Oh, hi. Good evening.
Good evening. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes. I just want to say good evening to Javed. I know Javed well from Vieux-Fort, from OG, as a matter of fact. And Javed, it's so good to see you and how versed you are in that particular field. I just want to say to you concerning recently what has been happening to us as a business in St. Lucia, how our accounts have been someone has tried to access our business accounts, and not just ourselves, but other people that we know also. I know this is probably not going to be a complete answer, but what can businesses do as far as protecting their systems and their accounts in the banks from people who want to choose to infiltrate and get into their accounts?
Thank you very much.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Kifa. So it's good to hear from you. So in terms of business accounts, one of the things that business, are you referring more to they were attacking your system or your accounts at a bank?
He's already gone. So.
Okay. So just in terms of what businesses can do, is if you're referring to your own systems that you have hosted on site, some of the things that I would advise to do are to try to secure your system as much as possible. Some of that includes having strong passwords, ensuring that you don't allow open access. Another thing is that if you are already facing compromises, is that you would need to have mechanisms in place that can do logging. By logging, I mean that you keep track of what happened. So that can help you in detecting what actually did take place. And going back into the open access, what I was referring to is that if for example your system is such that anyone can walk up to your business and connect to your network, that's probably not the most advisable system. Another thing to actually look at is your access controls at your business, and do you allow all users access to all information? So that again would not be a good model. So one of the things even during this workshop is that you want to try to ensure that you have the concept of least privileges. You should only have access to what you need to do for your job. And that's something that you tend to have as a problem, where when designing a system, folks just say that, okay, I'll grant access to everything. It's easier. But the problem is that it now means that you have much less control of it.
Now, I mean, how do you do that? Because a lot of people don't understand these things about, you know, computers, about technology, about the systems. We have a call on the line. Just hold first 1 second. I was in Trinidad last year at an international conference. And I had to tell some of my colleagues, hey, you need to secure your system because I can see all your information from my computer. You're like, how can you see that? You know, I mean, so probably there needs to be some education as to how you can secure that. We have this call. Good evening, caller. We lost him. Yeah, but what can you do to ensure that such information does not go out unwittingly?
Okay, so some of the things that you can do, I'll just give a few high-level examples, or some examples that you can actually do. Is one of the quick things that you can do to ensure that any default passwords or any default passwords you have on your devices are changed. So one of the first things an attacker would do is to try either no password or the default password. And you'll be surprised at the number of devices where folks deploy it and don't change it. And the fact that it has a default password means that anyone reading the manual knows the password. And obviously that's not a good thing. So that's something that you can do immediately. And you should when actually deploying any devices. Other things that you can actually do is if you are a website, or just some examples that you want to ensure that you have secure transmission if you are handling any sensitive data. So these are just a couple examples of things a business can actually attempt to do in order to try to ensure that you have as secure data as possible.
I want to switch gears a bit and talk about mobile devices. St. Lucians and a lot of Caribbean people swear by Blackberries, and this is the standard for the region. I mean, what is the difference in terms of ease of use and efficiency, effectiveness, your Blackberries versus the Android handsets, and which would you recommend as far as usage?
So I'm not going to be able to give a recommendation. So I don't think that's necessarily a rule. I can describe maybe a bit about the models, about the security models. That's actually one of the topics I discussed with the participants today during the workshop. As most people know that BlackBerry is still pretty popular in the Caribbean. It's become less popular in the US, like due to the prevalence of Android and iOS. In terms of its security model, BlackBerry actually developed a pretty secure model, and they did a very good job of ensuring security, of ensuring security and confidentiality of their messages. That's why the US government, for example, still uses BlackBerries a fair amount. And in the UK, BlackBerries are the default means of communication. They will harden it, but it gave them much greater power, or it was a more secure by default configuration. That's in comparison to Android. In terms of its development, Android was something that was developed by Google. And they've developed this platform as an open source platform. So something that's where it's more freely contributed. And one of the issues with that, it's gained a lot in market share, and that's great. I actually have an Android phone myself. But one of the problems with Android is that your security model relies on multiple players. And that's the thing to keep in mind for security. And by multiple players, I mean that you have Google, who develops the underlying operating system, and you have your manufacturers. So your manufacturers also are a great player in getting the phone to you. And the reason why that's a challenge is that the manufacturer's incentive is different from what Google's incentive is. Your manufacturer's incentive is that you buy a new phone soon, because that's where they would get money. So the incentive is you would need to replace your phone as quickly as possible. The sooner you replace it, the better. And the reason I was bringing up that as an example is that one of the challenges with Android is updating your Android phones. And part of the reason is that your manufacturer's motivation, in that their motivation, the carrier's motivation as well, would be the quicker they can get you to upgrade, the better. Whilst compared to, say, Apple's iOS, who control all layers of the chain, from the device to the software on the App Store, their model is different in that they have greater control over the entire chain. So one thing I do want to bring up, I hope I did not bore you with too many technical details, and what I do want to get across is that in analyzing the security of any system, always look at the motivation of the players. And the motivation of the players makes a difference in terms of how they will interact.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I guess we can also discuss, you know, the open source versus the proprietary software, and you started discussing that, you know, Apple, for example, they believe in their proprietary.
Yeah.
They own all layers of the process, you know, of the system, and yeah, as you said, easier to, well, for a fee
Yeah.
to upgrade and stuff. I mean, but in terms of, you know, security, you mentioned that as far as, you know, having multiple layers for the Android system. I mean, how difficult is it to keep track of all those security layers and making sure that all of them are up to date and protect your information?
So as Clinton pointed out, like multiple layers increases the complexity, and anytime you increase the complexity of a system, you make it more challenging to secure it. So in some cases you have no choice and you have to have your multiple layers and you have to have your increased complexity. But keep in mind that this then means that you have greater challenges to secure it. In terms of, like, also you're talking about open source versus proprietary. Open source, for those of you that may not know what we're referring to there, open source is freely available software where folks contribute code and you can basically download the software for free. Proprietary software would be software basically provided by a company for a fee. So you pay them, they give you a copy of it. The challenges for open source, there are trade-offs for either one. Okay. So there are trade-offs for either one in that open source are reviewed by more people, in that anyone can review it. But it also means that's also a detriment in that it means your attacker has access to your code as well. So if you see an issue, the attacker, it might be an attacker sees the issue first and exploits it before someone that actually wants to contribute to the code sees it. So there is a sense that it's not that you can assume that only a good person is contributing to open source. An attacker can use your open source code to find vulnerabilities.
We have a call on the line. Good evening, caller. Please go ahead with your question.
Good evening, host and guest. To the guest, are you a St. Lucian?
Yes, I am a St. Lucian.
All right. Do you see potential for your kind of expertise in St. Lucia? Like, on an honest answer.
In terms of my expertise, yes, I do see potential, like, in the future in order to be able to leverage my skill set. I would not necessarily view that only St. Lucia. I do think, like, in terms of the entire region, as we move towards a more developed economy.
Okay, a few quick questions. I want your opinion on what you think about government bonds, because I'm a university graduate just like yourself, and I'd like your opinion on what you think about government bonding graduates to come back to St. Lucia to work, whereas depending on your field, all right, that may not necessarily be in your best interest. So what do you think, what direction you think St. Lucia should take tertiary education-wise in the future? Should we not worry about having St. Lucians who could reach a level of educational attainment and go as far as they can in their field, despite the fact that they may not even be working in St. Lucia, but they'd be making a difference in the world?
Okay, let me have you ask him the questions. He'll take a note of them and he will respond to them. So you're asking about the bonding?
Yes.
Yeah,
what
government
do you think
bonding.
about bonding university graduates? What does he think? Does he think it will be beneficial if the local cell phone companies introduce a 4G network in St. Lucia? All right, and does he think that will aid the creativity of St. Lucians technology-wise if we have island-wide access to Wi-Fi networks?
All right, thanks a lot for your question.
His opinion on that. All right,
Great.
Okay, so thanks for your questions, caller. So the first one about bonds and on whether university on working in St. Lucia, out of St. Lucia. One thing I'd like to add is that even if even if folks don't work in St. Lucia, there were still ways to make a difference, and that's the thing that I would endeavor to try to point out, in that, like, gaining skills from overseas, the ways to try to figure out ways you can actually necessarily make a difference, and make a difference to the island or to the region, because that's the only way the island will necessarily progress.
Yeah, and I think he was speaking specifically of, you know, government requiring graduates, you know, if you're on a government scholarship, for example, to come back to the island to give 2 years. I don't know if that was your situation, or you had special treatment.
So yeah, so in terms of like requiring to, like, part of the trade-off that the government that would have to actually make is that, is it in their interest to necessarily restrict the individual to where they don't achieve their full potential, or as close to their full potential? But the government also has a trade-off that if you'd never actually give anything back, then what was the point? So I do think some sort of middle ground can be found, and there is no black and white answer. I think too many times we look for a black and white answer, and we're like, okay, you have to do it that way, otherwise there is no other way to do it. And in a lot of circumstances, that's not necessarily true. So switching to his other questions, the one about cell phones and the 4G network, that's actually one of the down in terms of St. Lucia moving up the food chain. One of the things that needs to be addressed is you want to try to make it a little bit more competitive, broadband cheaper, and as you start to have more and more push for the e-commerce plan, that I guess should be one of the initiatives, or one of the moves. In terms of 4G itself, yes, that would help mobile development. That would help folks building their own apps, and that's certainly a good thing. While it's a good thing, I would not say that it's currently blocking folks from doing actual development. What you do need to build right now is you build a skill set, and build a developer base that actually wants to go ahead and do so.
Now, let me just interject here, because some folks, like myself, would not understand the difference between 4G and 3G, and what it really, and 2G, if there's such a thing. What really is the difference between the Gs, the number of Gs?
So it's just the spectrum, the wireless spectrum that's going to be used, and the main difference is speed. So the main difference is your data.
So the more Gs you have is the higher speed.
Yeah, generally. So the more Gs, the higher speed. And the reason why speed makes a huge difference is that as you have more and more rich content, you no longer have, I'm sure most of you don't go to text-only websites like you may have gone to in the 90s, where most websites were text-only. The reason being that you would have a modem. And if you have a modem and you save a picture, you need to wait 5 minutes. So as you have more and more rich content, you want to have a better connection. And in terms of the 4G, 3G, as you have richer and richer functionality on your mobile application, again, you want to be able to have a quicker mobile network.
And he also asked about island-wide Wi-Fi, you know, the possibility, and how easy or difficult would it be to implement Wi-Fi around the island, as the Labour government promised during the campaign, the election campaign.
So, yeah, so in terms of its feasibility, and its St. Lucia, it would be more of a challenge St. Lucia than another island, given the terrain, just from a practical standpoint. It's a very worthwhile endeavor, and it will. But one of the things that I do want to emphasize is that it's not just a matter of putting in the infrastructure. So just having Wi-Fi without folks using it properly, or using it for basically using it for things that might generate revenue, or for educational reasons, you do need to do some user education as well too. So in addition to just creating only the infrastructure, there has to be emphasis on how best to use it, or how best to maximize its potential. But it certainly would aid a great deal. Like, for example, if you know you can walk around Castries and use Wi-Fi on your phone, again, that would be a great thing, because you may not have to have as much mobile bandwidth. You may have a faster connection. You may be able to do transactions that you could not have done. You may be able to make Skype calls. That would be cheaper than making it via your mobile phone directly. Maybe not great for the telecom companies, but there would be winners and losers.
Well, they make enough money already as it is. I know you wouldn't say that, but in terms of the structures, you talked about our terrain. I mean, what infrastructure would be necessary for that to happen? Would it be similar to the cell phone towers that are in place for this Wi-Fi, this island-wide Wi-Fi to be a reality?
I guess there were various technologies that could be used. One thing that seems to have been used is WiMAX. So there are various technologies. In terms of the best one, not as well versed in terms of can't give an answer as to what the best technology would be. But what I would say is that the focus should not be on, say, blanket coverage initially. Maybe the focus is initially on you give coverage as what seems to be the model. You give coverage in specific areas. So starting like you started with Soufrière, then you move to other villages and other villages and towns. So you might give coverage initially to some certain key areas in the community, and then you keep on expanding. So while the overall goal is to have island-wide Wi-Fi, initially what you want to do is ensure that as many public places as possible do have that.
I want to go back to your mission and your interaction with the experts on the island, and what other plans might be in train for you as an expert, a man who is super intelligent, one who has a handle on what happens in the global environment, in the industrialized countries. I mean, how can St. Lucia, and somebody alluded to that earlier on, one of the callers, how can St. Lucia use your expertise per se, to elevate our standard, to make technology more real and to make it more practical for us here?
So in terms of using my standards, I would not limit to just my standards. I would refer to other folks that might be in the diaspora as well too. In that even for folks that may not be directly in St. Lucia all the time, events such as this where you can contribute your user knowledge. One of the things I've been able to discuss with folks that are participants would be stop the types of issues that I may have seen at clients, the types of issues I've seen at my previous work experience. And that can be helpful in that you can help ensure that the IT experts in St. Lucia don't make similar mistakes. So by basically describing what are some of the things that you saw going wrong, that can help significantly. And in terms of next steps and so on, that is still unclear as of right now.
You're watching Newsmaker Live. I'm speaking here with Javed Samuel. We'll take our final break on the program. When we come back, we'll discuss other issues and a wrap-up of what exactly he is expecting to come out from his experience here. Stay with us.